They laughed when she pulled out nothing more than a pencil and a scrap of paper, but by the end of the day, her map would outsmart every satellite in the galaxy. The underestimated human. The gleaming corridors of the Galactic Defense Academy stretched endlessly through the massive space station Kythera, their polished surfaces reflecting the soft blue glow of artificial starlight. This wasn't just any educational institution floating in the void between systems. This was where the galaxy's future military leaders learned the art of war, strategy, and protection of countless civilizations. The Academy's reputation preceded it across known space, and graduation from Kythera guaranteed a position of honor in any species' defense force. Captain Elena Vasquez walked these hallowed halls with measured steps, her worn leather boots making soft sounds against the pristine metal flooring. At 42 years old, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen real combat, not just simulated exercises. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical military bun, and her brown eyes held the kind of alertness that comes from years of making life-or-death decisions in the depths of space. She wore the standard Academy instructor uniform, but somehow it looked different on her human frame compared to her alien colleagues. Elena was the first and only human instructor in the Academy's 300-year history. Her appointment 6 months ago had caused quite a stir among the faculty, most of whom belonged to species that had been exploring space for millennia while humans were still discovering fire. The controversy wasn't entirely unexpected. Humanity had only joined the Galactic Council 15 years earlier, making them relative newcomers to the cosmic community. Many species viewed humans as primitive, aggressive, and lacking the sophisticated military traditions that other civilizations had developed over thousands of years. The faculty lounge buzzed with the usual morning conversations as Elena entered to collect her daily briefings. The room fell noticeably quieter as she approached the central information terminal. Commander Zixith, the Academy's head administrator, stood near the large viewport that offered a spectacular view of the nearby nebula. His reptilian saurian features were marked by the ceremonial scars that indicated his high rank within his species' military hierarchy. His yellow eyes tracked Elena's movement with the cold calculation of a predator evaluating potential prey. "Captain Vasquez," Zixith's voice carried the distinctive hiss that marked his species' speech patterns. "I trust you have reviewed the parameters for this semester's final simulation exercise." Elena nodded respectfully. The final simulation was the Academy's most prestigious event, where senior cadets would be divided into teams and engage in large-scale fleet combat scenarios. The exercise tested everything students had learned about strategy, tactics, leadership, and coordination. More importantly, it determined which graduates would receive the most coveted assignments in the galaxy's various defense forces. "I have, Commander. My students are as ready as they'll ever be." Elena's voice carried the steady tone of someone accustomed to military protocol, but there was an underlying warmth that seemed to puzzle her alien colleagues. Professor Veltar approached from across the room, her crystalline body refracting the light into dancing rainbows across the walls. As the Academy's premier weapons technology expert, she commanded respect from students and faculty alike. Her species, the Luminar, had developed some of the most advanced military hardware in known space. Their crystal-based technology could process battle data at speeds that made other species' computers look primitive. "Captain," Veltar's voice resonated with harmonic frequencies that created an almost musical quality. "I must express concern about your teaching methods. Your students spend considerable time on what you call improvisation exercises rather than studying established tactical doctrine. Such approaches seem inefficient." Elena had heard similar criticism many times before. Her teaching style was indeed different from her colleagues. While other instructors focused on memorizing time-tested strategies and operating advanced technological systems, Elena emphasized creative thinking, adaptability, and what she called thinking outside the paradigm. Her students spent hours in scenarios where their equipment failed, their communications were jammed, or they faced enemies using completely unknown tactics. "Professor, I appreciate your concern," Elena replied diplomatically. "However, I believe preparing students for the unexpected is just as important as teaching them established procedures. Real combat rarely follows textbook scenarios." Instructor Morden clicked his mandibles in what passed for amusement among his species. The insectoid being served as the Academy's tactical specialist, representing the Hive collective that had fought and won wars through perfect coordination and overwhelming numbers. His compound eyes could process multiple data streams simultaneously, making him an excellent strategist for conventional warfare. Captain Vasquez. Mordun's voice carried the rhythmic clicking that accompanied his species' communication. Your experience is limited to conflicts involving primitive opponents using basic technology. Here at the Academy, we prepare students for warfare against civilizations with weapons that can destroy star systems. Your human methods may prove inadequate for such scenarios. The dismissive tone wasn't lost on Elena, but she had learned to pick her battles carefully. Direct confrontation with her colleagues would only reinforce their perception of humans as an aggressive, uncivilized species. Instead, she maintained her professional demeanor while quietly revolutionizing how she taught warfare to the next generation of galactic defenders. Elena's classroom was located in the Academy's tactical wing, where advanced holographic systems could create realistic battle simulations. Unlike other instructors who used these systems to replay famous historical battles, Elena created original scenarios that challenged her students to think creatively. Her class roster included representatives from 12 different species, each bringing unique biological and cultural perspectives to military problem-solving. Cadet Jexlin was Elena's most promising student. The young cetacean had volunteered for military service despite her species' traditionally peaceful nature. Her aquatic heritage gave her an intuitive understanding of three-dimensional movement that translated perfectly to space combat. More importantly, she possessed the intellectual curiosity that Elena valued above raw talent or advanced technology. Professor Vasquez, Jexelin's voice carried the melodic quality common to her species, though her words were carefully measured. The other instructors say your methods are unorthodox. Some of the cadets from other classes are calling our training primitive human tactics. Elena looked around at her assembled students. Cadet Thros, a massive Earth-sign warrior whose species had conquered half their home galaxy through sheer military might, shifted uncomfortably in his specially reinforced chair. His bear-like features showed the confusion he felt about Elena's unconventional lessons. Beside him sat Cadet Nixwin, whose ethereal void-born physiology allowed her to exist partially in normal space and partially in subspace dimensions. Her gossamer form flickered slightly as she considered Elena's teaching methods. Let me ask you all something, Elena said, activating the classroom's holographic display. The system projected a three-dimensional star map showing a typical fleet engagement. What do you see when you look at this battle scenario? Cadet Thros raised his massive paw. I see the proper deployment of heavy cruisers in a forward assault formation, supported by fighter squadrons and protected by destroyer escorts. Cadet Nixwen? The Voidborn's voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I observed the standard tactical doctrine for engaging an enemy fleet of comparable size using established engagement protocols. Elena nodded approvingly. Both excellent observations based on everything you've learned here at the Academy. Now let me show you what I see. She manipulated the holographic controls, highlighting different aspects of the same battle scenario. I see predictable movement patterns that an intelligent enemy could exploit. I see communication protocols that could be jammed or intercepted. I see formations optimized for fighting other fleets that follow the same tactical doctrine. The classroom fell silent as students processed this perspective. Elena continued her analysis, pointing out assumptions built into standard military thinking that might not apply when facing truly unknown opponents. The galaxy is vast, Elena explained, her voice taking on the tone of someone sharing hard-earned wisdom. We've only explored a tiny fraction of what's out there. Someday you'll encounter enemies who don't follow our rules, who don't use our technology, and who don't think the way we expect them to think. When that day comes, the ability to adapt and improvise might be the only thing standing between victory and extinction. Cadet Jexlin raised her fin hand. But, Professor, our technological advantages are significant. The weapons and defensive systems developed by species like the Luminar or the Nexus Commonwealth can destroy entire planets. Surely primitive tactics cannot overcome such overwhelming firepower. Elena smiled with the expression of someone who had heard similar arguments many times before. Let me tell you about a battle that happened on my homeworld many centuries ago. A small group of farmers and merchants faced the most powerful military force of their time. The enemy had better weapons, better armor, superior numbers, and professional training. According to every tactical manual ever written, the farmers should have been defeated in hours. She paused, looking around at her students' attentive faces. But the farmers won. They won because they understood their environment better than their enemies. They won because they were willing to fight in ways their opponents didn't expect. They won because they refused to accept that superior technology automatically meant victory. Cadet Thros growled softly, a sign of deep thought among his species. You speak of irregular warfare. My people consider such methods dishonorable. Honor is important, Elena acknowledged. But survival is more important. Your honor means nothing if your civilization is extinct because you refuse to adapt your tactics to meet new threats. The discussion continued for another hour, with Elena guiding her students through scenarios that challenged their preconceptions about warfare. Unlike other classes at the academy, hers felt more like philosophical debates than military instruction. Students were encouraged to question everything, to think creatively, and to consider possibilities that conventional wisdom dismissed as impossible. As the class period ended and students filed out, Elena noticed several of them continuing their discussions in the hallway. This was always a good sign. Real learning happened when students started thinking about problems outside the classroom, when they began questioning assumptions they had never examined before. The next few weeks would be crucial. The final simulation exercise would pit her students against teams trained by her alien colleagues, and Elena knew the entire academy would be watching. The other instructors expected her team to be quickly overwhelmed by superior firepower and conventional tactics. They saw the exercise as an opportunity to prove that human military thinking was primitive and ineffective. Elena had different plans. Over the coming weeks, she would prepare her students for a type of warfare that the galaxy had never seen before. She would teach them to think like humans, to embrace creativity over convention, and to turn their opponents' strengths into weaknesses. The galaxy was about to learn why humanity had survived and thrived despite starting with nothing more than curiosity, determination, and the willingness to try approaches that everyone else considered impossible. The silence that would follow their victory would echo through the halls of military academies across known space, forcing every species to reconsider their assumptions about the newest members of the galactic community. As Elena walked back to her quarters that evening, she carried with her the quiet confidence of someone who had seen the power of human ingenuity before. The coming battle wouldn't just be a simulation exercise, it would be humanity's introduction to galactic warfare, and she intended to make sure it was an introduction the galaxy would never forget. The test begins. The Academy's main auditorium had been transformed into a command center that rivaled anything found on the most advanced military vessels in the galaxy. Massive holographic displays showed real-time data from the simulation zone, a carefully controlled region of space where decommissioned warships had been converted into sophisticated training platforms. Every seat in the auditorium was filled with faculty, visiting dignitaries, and lower-class cadets who had gathered to witness what many considered the most important military exercise in recent Academy history. Commander Zixith stood at the central podium, his reptilian features highlighted by the glow from the tactical displays. His ceremonial military uniform bore the insignia of multiple campaigns, each one representing a victory achieved through superior firepower and conventional strategy. Behind him, the main screen showed a three-dimensional map of the exercise zone, complete with asteroid fields, nebula formations, and the starting positions for each team. Distinguished faculty and honored guests, Zixith began, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to commanding fleets across multiple star systems. Today we witness the culmination of our cadets' education. 4 teams, each representing different tactical philosophies, will engage in unrestricted fleet combat. The scenario is simple: locate and destroy all enemy forces while protecting your own assets. The audience murmured with anticipation as the screen shifted to show the participating teams. Team Alpha, trained by Professor Veltar, consisted of 8 cadets from the most technologically advanced species in the galaxy. Their assigned fleet included the latest Crystal Matrix battleships capable of coordinating attacks through quantum-linked communication systems. Team Beta, under Instructor Morden's guidance, represented the Hive Collective's approach to warfare through overwhelming numbers and perfect coordination. Team Gamma showcased the Nexus Commonwealth's doctrine of defensive superiority, using energy shields and Fortress-class vessels that could withstand planet-killing weapons. Then there was Team Delta. Elena's students looked almost insignificant compared to the others. Cadet Jexlin sat at the primary command station, her aquatic features calm despite the magnitude of the challenge ahead. Beside her, Cadet Thros reviewed tactical data with the methodical precision his warrior heritage demanded. Cadet Nixwin flickered between dimensions as she monitored sensor readings, while the rest of Elena's diverse class prepared for what every observer expected to be a swift defeat. Team Delta has been assigned the oldest vessels in our training fleet, Zixith announced with barely concealed satisfaction. These ships represent the kind of basic technology that most civilizations used during their early spacefaring periods. While lacking the advanced capabilities of their opponents, these vessels will provide an interesting contrast in tactical approaches. Elena stood in the instructor's observation area, surrounded by her colleagues who made little effort to hide their amusement. The human captain had requested the oldest, most basic ships available, claiming they would better suit her teaching philosophy. Most faculty members saw this as evidence of humanity's primitive understanding of modern warfare. Captain Vasquez, Professor Veltar's crystalline form refracted the display lights into prismatic patterns as she spoke. I must ask if you're certain about your equipment choices. My students have access to weapon systems that can pierce any known defensive technology. Perhaps you would prefer to request more suitable vessels? Elena smiled with the quiet confidence that had become her trademark during her time at the academy. Thank you for the concern, Professor, but my students are prepared for exactly this scenario. Sometimes the most advanced technology can become a disadvantage if you become too dependent on it. Instructor Morden's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his species. Captain, your students face opponents with quantum-linked tactical networks, reality-altering weapon systems, and defensive capabilities that approach theoretical invincibility. I fail to see how outdated equipment and unconventional thinking can overcome such overwhelming advantages. The exercise began at precisely 0800 Galactic Standard Time. The four fleets materialized in different sectors of the simulation zone, each team immediately implementing the strategies they had spent months perfecting. Team Alpha's crystal ships began establishing quantum communication networks that would allow them to coordinate attacks with mathematical precision. Team Beta deployed in the classic hive formation, with smaller vessels creating an impenetrable wall of overlapping fire zones around their command ships. Team Gamma activated their legendary defensive screens and settled into fortress positions designed to absorb any attack while systematically destroying their enemies. Team Delta did something completely unexpected. They scattered. Within minutes of the exercise beginning, Elena's students had dispersed their fleet across the entire simulation zone. Individual ships disappeared into asteroid fields, nebula formations, and the shadowy regions between star systems. From the Academy's observation center, it looked like Team Delta had panicked and fled in random directions. Fascinating, Commander Zixith commented, his reptilian features showing mild amusement. It appears the human training methods emphasize individual survival over coordinated tactics. This should make for an interesting case study in the importance of proper military doctrine. The first engagement occurred 37 minutes into the exercise. Team Alpha's advanced sensors detected one of Team Delta's ships hiding within a dense asteroid field. 3 Crystal Matrix battleships moved to intercept, their quantum-linked systems calculating firing solutions with perfect accuracy. The isolated vessel appeared to be completely outmatched, facing weapons that could shatter planets and shields that could deflect stellar radiation. Then something remarkable happened. The lone Team Delta ship didn't try to fight or flee. Instead, it led its pursuers deeper into the asteroid field while transmitting what appeared to be random sensor data. Team Alpha's commanders, confident in their technological superiority, followed without hesitation. Their advanced systems easily tracked the fleeing vessel through the rocky maze, calculating the perfect moment to unleash their overwhelming firepower. The trap was sprung with devastating effectiveness. As Team Alpha's ships converged on their target, carefully placed explosive charges detonated throughout the asteroid field. The explosions had been timed to create a cascade effect, turning the entire region into a storm of high-velocity debris that no shield system could repel. 2 of the 3 pursuing vessels were destroyed instantly, while the third suffered critical damage that left it dead in space. The Academy's auditorium fell silent as observers tried to process what they had witnessed. The advanced quantum-linked systems that made Team Alpha's coordination possible had also made them predictable. Elena's students had exploited this predictability, using the enemy's own tactical algorithms against them. Impossible, Professor Veltar whispered, her crystalline form dimming with shock. The probability calculations clearly indicated that engagement should have resulted in the immediate destruction of the inferior vessel. Their technology should have prevented any successful ambush. Elena maintained her calm expression, though inside she felt a surge of pride for her students' performance. Professor, your calculations assumed both sides would follow established tactical doctrine. My students specialize in doing the unexpected. The exercise continued with increasing intensity as the remaining teams adapted to this new variable. Team Beta's hive formations proved more flexible than expected, their collective consciousness allowing rapid tactical adjustments. However, Elena's students had anticipated this adaptability. Instead of engaging the hive forces directly, they began targeting the communication relays that enabled the collective's coordination. Cadet Nixwin's unique abilities proved invaluable for this strategy. Her void-born physiology allowed her to exist partially in subspace, making her ship nearly impossible to detect using conventional sensors. She moved like a ghost through the battle zone, appearing just long enough to destroy critical communication nodes before vanishing back into dimensional space. Within 2 hours, Team Beta's perfect coordination had degraded into confused individual actions as ships lost contact with the collective consciousness. Team Gamma's fortress strategy initially seemed immune to Team Delta's unconventional tactics. Their massive defensive platforms could absorb incredible amounts of damage while their heavy weapons systematically eliminated any target within range. The Commonwealth's military doctrine had been refined over millennia to create what many considered the perfect defensive system. Elena's students found the flaw that pure defensive thinking always created. Fortress-minded opponents became psychologically committed to holding specific positions, making them predictable and ultimately vulnerable. Instead of attacking the fortified positions directly, Team Delta began systematically destroying everything else in the simulation zone. Supply depots, communication stations, sensor arrays, and even minor asteroid mining operations were eliminated with surgical precision. Cadet Jexlin coordinated these operations from her mobile command ship, using her species' intuitive understanding of three-dimensional movement to stay ahead of enemy pursuit. Her tactical decisions seemed random to observers, but Elena recognized the underlying pattern. Each attack served multiple purposes, gathering intelligence, disrupting enemy operations, and forcing opponents to react rather than execute their preferred strategies. "This is not warfare," Instructor Morden protested, his compound eyes tracking the chaos unfolding on the tactical displays. "These are the actions of pirates and raiders, not military professionals. Where is the honor in destroying civilian infrastructure and avoiding direct engagement?" Elena turned to face her colleague with an expression of patient instruction. "Instructor, in real warfare, the objective is victory, not adherence to honorable traditions. My students are demonstrating that conventional military thinking has limitations that creative opponents can exploit." The turning point came during the 4th hour of the exercise. Team Gamma's fortress positions had become increasingly isolated as their support infrastructure was systematically eliminated. Their commanders, trained in the finest defensive traditions, refused to abandon their prepared positions despite mounting logistical problems. This commitment to doctrine became their downfall. Cadet Thros led the final assault, but not in the way anyone expected. Instead of attacking the fortified positions with conventional weapons, his team used captured enemy equipment to broadcast false surrender signals. When Team Gamma's forces lowered their shields to accept the surrender, they discovered too late that the approaching vessels were actually automated drones packed with explosives. The massive fortress ships, designed to withstand direct hits from planet-killing weapons, were destroyed from within by relatively simple explosive devices. Their advanced defensive systems, optimized to repel external attacks, provided no protection against threats that originated inside their own defensive perimeters. As the simulation entered its final phase, only scattered remnants of the three opposing teams remained active. Team Alpha's quantum-linked systems lay in ruins, their technological advantages neutralized by tactics they had never been programmed to anticipate. Team Beta's collective consciousness had been fragmented into confused individual units. Team Gamma's impregnable fortresses had become their tombs. Team Delta, which had started the exercise with the oldest and most primitive equipment in the Academy's inventory, emerged as the clear victor. Their casualties were minimal, their objectives achieved, and their opponents thoroughly defeated. More importantly, they had accomplished this victory using methods that challenged every assumption about modern warfare. The auditorium remained silent as final casualty reports appeared on the main display. Faculty members stared at the results in disbelief, trying to understand how their carefully refined tactical doctrines had been so thoroughly defeated by what they had dismissed as primitive human thinking. Elena looked around at her colleagues' shocked expressions and realized that this was just the beginning. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't superior technology or ancient military traditions. It was the willingness to think differently, to question assumptions, and to find new solutions to old problems. The silence that filled the auditorium was more than surprise at an unexpected outcome. It was the sound of paradigms shifting, of comfortable certainties being challenged, and of a galaxy beginning to understand that the newest members of the galactic community brought gifts that couldn't be measured in firepower or defensive capabilities. Tomorrow, military academies across known space would begin studying the recordings of this exercise, trying to understand how everything they thought they knew about warfare had been proven inadequate by a human instructor and her diverse group of students. The age of predictable, conventional military thinking was coming to an end, replaced by something far more dangerous to enemies and far more promising for allies: human creativity unleashed on the ancient art of war. The galaxy falls silent. The aftermath of the simulation exercise created a silence that seemed to echo through every corridor of the Galactic Defense Academy. In the hours following Team Delta's impossible victory, faculty members wandered the halls with expressions of bewildered contemplation, trying to process what they had witnessed. The comfortable certainties that had guided military thinking for millennia lay in ruins, shattered as thoroughly as the virtual fleets that had fallen to Elena's unconventional tactics. Commander Zixith stood alone in his private office, staring at the official exercise reports that covered his desk in neat, organized stacks. Each document told the same impossible story from a different perspective. Advanced quantum-linked battle networks had been defeated by explosive charges and misdirection. Perfect collective consciousness had been disrupted by targeting communication nodes that conventional wisdom considered unimportant. Impregnable fortress defenses had been penetrated by thinking like the enemy instead of simply overwhelming them with superior firepower. The reptilian commander's yellow eyes moved across casualty figures that defied every military simulation he had ever run. Team Delta had achieved a complete victory with less than 12% losses, while their opponents suffered near total destruction. More disturbing than the numbers themselves was the methodology. Elena's students had won by breaking rules that weren't even recognized as rules until someone ignored them completely. A soft chime announced an incoming communication from the Galactic Council Military Affairs Committee. Zixith accepted the connection, and the holographic form of Fleet Admiral Cathara materialized above his desk. The elderly Nexus Commonwealth leader bore the scars of dozens of campaigns, her cybernetic implants marking her as a veteran of the most advanced military traditions in known space. Commander Zixith, the Admiral's voice carried the weight of authority earned through centuries of successful warfare. I have reviewed the preliminary reports from your Academy's simulation exercise. I must confess the results are unexpected. Zixith straightened his posture automatically. Fleet Admiral Cathara was legendary throughout the galaxy, credited with developing many of the defensive strategies that had protected Commonwealth worlds for generations. Her opinion carried more weight than entire military councils from lesser civilizations. Admiral, I share your surprise at the outcome. The human instructor's methods produced results that our analytical models failed to predict. I am concerned that we may have underestimated both human tactical thinking and the limitations of our own conventional approaches. The Admiral's holographic form leaned forward, her expression intense with professional interest. Commander, I want you to understand the implications of what occurred in your simulation. 3 of our most respected tactical doctrines were not merely defeated, they were made irrelevant. The quantum-linked coordination systems that cost the Luminar civilization 1,000 years to develop were neutralized by explosives and timing. The Hive Collective's consciousness network, which has never been successfully disrupted in 5 centuries of warfare, was fragmented by targeting infrastructure. Our own fortress defense protocols, which have protected Commonwealth worlds since before humanity discovered fire, were penetrated by psychological manipulation. Zixith nodded slowly, beginning to grasp the broader significance of Elena's victory. This wasn't just an academic exercise that had produced surprising results. This was evidence that the galaxy's understanding of warfare was fundamentally incomplete. Meanwhile, in the Academy's faculty lounge, Elena sat surrounded by her alien colleagues in what might generously be called a tense discussion. Professor Veltar's crystalline form flickered with agitated energy patterns, while Instructor Mordoon's mandibles clicked repeatedly in the nervous rhythm that indicated deep confusion among his species. Captain Vasquez. Professor Veltar's harmonic voice carried undertones of professional frustration. Your students' tactics bordered on barbarism. The deliberate targeting of civilian infrastructure, the use of deception and misdirection, the refusal to engage in honorable direct combat. These methods violate the fundamental principles of civilized warfare. Elena maintained her calm demeanor, though she could sense the undercurrent of fear behind her colleagues' criticism. They weren't just questioning her methods, they were grappling with the possibility that their entire understanding of military science might be flawed. "Professor," Elena replied with patient respect, "may I ask what you consider the purpose of military action?" The question seemed to surprise Veltar. "The purpose is to achieve victory while demonstrating the superiority of advanced civilization over primitive aggression. Military forces exist to protect peaceful societies from those who would threaten them." "I agree with your goals," Elena said, "but I would suggest that the most important word in your statement is victory. Everything else is secondary to protecting the innocent by defeating those who threaten them. If honorable direct combat achieves that goal, then it's the right choice. If deception and misdirection save more lives by ending conflicts quickly, then they become the moral imperative." Instructor Mordun's compound eyes focused on Elena with the intensity of someone trying to solve an impossible puzzle. "But Captain, your methods assume that opponents will not adapt to unconventional tactics. Surely any competent military force would learn to counter such strategies after experiencing them once." Elena smiled with the expression of someone who had considered this objection many times before. "Instructor, that's exactly the point. The moment our enemies start adapting to unconventional tactics, they become vulnerable to conventional ones. The key isn't to find one perfect strategy. It's to remain unpredictable enough that opponents can't prepare for what you're going to do next." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Cadet Jexlin, who approached Elena's table with the measured movements of someone unsure of their reception. The young cetacean's aquatic features showed signs of the stress that came from being at the center of galactic attention. "Professor Vasquez," Jexlin's melodic voice carried a note of concern. "The other cadets are treating us differently now. Some seem afraid of us while others want to learn our methods. I'm not sure how to respond to either reaction." Elena gestured for Jexlin to join the conversation, noting how her alien colleagues tensed slightly at the cadet's presence. The young cetacean had commanded Team Delta's final assault with creativity and precision that would have been impressive in an officer with decades of experience. "Cadet, you and your teammates performed exactly as trained. The fact that your success surprises others says more about their assumptions than about your abilities. How are the rest of your team handling the attention?" Cadet Thros is confused by the praise he's receiving from warriors who previously considered human tactics dishonorable. Cadet Nixwin finds the whole situation amusing since her species has always viewed linear thinking as a limitation. "The others are proud of what we accomplished, but they're also aware that we've somehow changed something important." Professor Veltar's crystalline form shifted colors as she processed this information. "Cadet Jexlin, do you believe that conventional military doctrine is obsolete?" The young cetacean considered the question carefully before responding. "Professor, I believe that any doctrine becomes obsolete the moment everyone assumes it's universal. Professor Vasquez taught us that the most dangerous enemy is the one you think you completely understand, because that's when you stop preparing for surprises." 3 days after the simulation exercise, Elena received a summons to appear before an emergency session of the Galactic Council Military Affairs Committee. The meeting was to be held via holographic conference with representatives from every major military power in known space. As Elena prepared for what she knew would be an intense interrogation, she reflected on how quickly everything had changed. The conference room at the academy had been configured for maximum security, with quantum encryption protocols that would prevent any unauthorized monitoring of the proceedings. Elena took her seat at the central table as holographic representations of military leaders from across the galaxy materialized around her. She recognized most of them from her studies of galactic military history, legendary figures whose tactical innovations had shaped the course of interstellar warfare. Fleet Admiral Kethara served as the session's moderator, her cybernetic implants gleaming under the conference room's lighting. To her right sat General Thakmor of the Ursine Confederation, his massive bear-like form making the other representatives look diminutive by comparison. General Thakmor commanded respect throughout the galaxy for his species' uncompromising approach to warfare and their perfect record of victory in direct combat. On the Admiral's left, the translucent form of Consciousness Prime Zareth represented the Hive Collective. Unlike individual beings, Zareth was a direct manifestation of the collective military intelligence that had coordinated successful campaigns across multiple galaxies. Their presence at this meeting indicated that the Hive considered Elena's tactics a matter of existential importance. "Captain Vasquez," Admiral Kethara began, her voice carrying the formal tone reserved for matters of galactic security, "this committee has been convened to evaluate the implications of your tactical methodology. Your students' performance in the Academy simulation has raised questions about the adequacy of our current military doctrines." Elena nodded respectfully. Admiral, I'm honored by the committee's attention and ready to answer any questions about my teaching methods. General Thakmor leaned forward, his massive form radiating the kind of authority that came from leading successful campaigns across multiple star systems. Captain, my species has achieved victory in every military engagement for over 2,000 years. Our tactics emphasize overwhelming force, superior courage, and honorable direct combat, yet your simulation suggested that such approaches could be defeated by what appear to be cowardly hit-and-run tactics. General, Elena replied carefully, I would never describe the Ursine military tradition as inadequate. Your species' courage and military honor are legendary throughout the galaxy. However, courage and honor are most valuable when they're applied intelligently. My students didn't avoid direct combat because they lacked courage. They avoided it because direct combat would have been tactically foolish given their circumstances. Consciousness Prime Zarhith's form flickered as thousands of individual minds contributing to the collective intelligence processed Elena's words. When they spoke, their voice carried the harmonic resonance of multiple beings speaking in perfect unison. Captain Vasquez, the Hive Collective has achieved perfect coordination through shared consciousness for millennia. Our ability to act as one mind controlling thousands of vessels has made us invincible in conventional warfare. Yet your students disrupted this coordination by targeting communication infrastructure. How do we defend against tactics that attack our greatest strengths? Elena paused, recognizing that her answer would influence military policy across multiple civilizations. Consciousness Prime, the Hive's coordination abilities are genuinely impressive and provide enormous tactical advantages. However, any system that depends on centralized communication creates vulnerabilities that can be exploited. The solution isn't to abandon your strengths, but to develop backup systems that can function independently when primary coordination is disrupted. Fleet Admiral Cathara studied Elena with the intense focus of someone evaluating a potential threat. Captain, your recommendations would require fundamental changes to military doctrines that have been successful for thousands of years. Are you suggesting that every major military power in the galaxy has been conducting warfare incorrectly? Not incorrectly, Admiral, Elena replied, but incompletely. Every tactical doctrine works until you encounter an opponent who refuses to fight according to your assumptions. The galaxy is vast, and we've only explored a tiny fraction of what's out there. Someday we'll encounter enemies who don't follow our rules, who don't use our technology, and who don't think the way we expect them to think. The silence that followed Elena's words was profound. Every military leader in the conference understood the implications of what she was suggesting. If humanity's unconventional approach to warfare could defeat the galaxy's most advanced military doctrines, what did that say about their preparedness for truly unknown threats? General Thakmor broke the silence with a question that revealed how much the simulation had changed his thinking. Captain, if you were to redesign galactic military training from the beginning, what would you prioritize? Elena had been hoping for exactly this question. General, I would emphasize adaptability over technology, creativity over doctrine, and understanding over memorization. I would teach officers to think like their enemies, to question their own assumptions, and to find new solutions to old problems. Most importantly, I would ensure that every military leader understands that the most dangerous moment in any conflict is when you think you know exactly what your opponent is going to do next. The conference continued for several hours, with Elena fielding questions about specific tactical innovations, psychological warfare principles, and methods for training officers to think creatively under pressure. As the session progressed, she could see the paradigm shift occurring in real time. Military leaders who had begun the meeting skeptical of human methods were asking increasingly detailed questions about implementation and adaptation. When the conference finally ended, Elena sat alone in the empty room, processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. The galaxy's military establishment hadn't just acknowledged the effectiveness of her methods, they had begun planning how to incorporate them into their own training programs. 2 weeks later, Elena received official notification of her promotion to Director of Tactical Innovation for the Galactic Defense Academy. Her new position would involve developing curricula for military academies across known space, ensuring that future officers were prepared for the kind of asymmetric warfare that humanity specialized in. The appointment ceremony took place in the Academy's main auditorium, with representatives from every major military power in attendance. Commander Zixeth presented Elena with the ceremonial insignia of her new rank, his reptilian features showing genuine respect rather than the barely concealed skepticism that had marked their earlier interactions. Director Vasquez, Zixeth said as he pinned the new rank insignia to Elena's uniform, The Galactic Defense Academy has never had a position like the one you now hold. You are tasked with preparing our military leaders for threats we cannot yet imagine, using methods we are only beginning to understand. The responsibility is enormous, but we believe you are uniquely qualified to meet this challenge. Elena accepted the appointment with the humility of someone who understood that her real work was just beginning. As she looked out at the assembled representatives, she saw the future of galactic military thinking beginning to take shape. The comfortable certainties of the past were giving way to something more challenging, but ultimately more effective. The willingness to adapt, to think creatively, and to never assume that superior technology automatically guaranteed victory. The silence that had followed her students' simulation victory had evolved into something more significant. It had become the sound of an entire galaxy reconsidering its assumptions about warfare, strategy, and the true nature of military strength. Humanity had found its place in the galactic community not through superior firepower or ancient traditions, but through the one gift that no amount of technology could replicate: the ability to think differently about old problems and find new solutions that others had never considered. As Elena began her new duties, she carried with her the knowledge that humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization wouldn't be measured in weapons or defensive systems. It would be measured in minds open to new possibilities, assumptions challenged, and the willingness to admit that there was always more to learn about the ancient art of war. The galaxy had fallen silent not in defeat, but in recognition of something it had never encountered before: a species that made creativity and adaptability the foundation of their military strength. The age of predictable warfare was ending, replaced by something far more dangerous to enemies and far more promising for those wise enough to embrace change. Humanity had shown the galaxy that sometimes the most advanced military thinking involved remembering the simple truth that the best strategies are the ones your enemy never sees coming.